The subway car rattled through the dark tunnels beneath the city, its fluorescent lights flickering like a dying pulse. Ethan Walsh sat hunched in a corner seat, his 6-year-old daughter, Lily, curled up against him, her head resting on his shoulder. Her soft snores blended with the rhythmic clatter of the train, a small comfort in the chaos of their daily commute. Ethan's calloused hand rested on her backpack, his fingers tracing the worn edges of the pink fabric. It was too late for a kid her age to be out, but his shift at the construction site had run long, and the babysitter had bailed again. Single dad life meant juggling everything, and tonight, like most nights, he felt like he was dropping all the balls. The car was nearly empty, just a handful of passengers scattered across the seats, a guy in a hoodie scrolling on his phone, an older woman clutching a grocery bag, and a young woman in a navy coat standing near the doors, her posture rigid, one hand gripping the pole, the other pressed against her stomach. Ethan barely noticed her at first. His attention split between keeping Lily comfortable and mentally calculating how many hours of sleep he'd get before his 5 a.m. wake-up, but something about the woman's sharp intake of breath caught his ear, a sound that cut through the train's hum like a warning. He glanced up. The woman's face was pale, her lips pressed into a tight line. She was young, maybe mid-20s, with dark hair spilling out from under a knit cap. Her hand tightened on the pole, and she swayed slightly, her knees buckling for a moment before she caught herself. Ethan's instincts, honed by years of parenting and a brief stint as an EMT before Lily was born, kicked in. Something was wrong. "You okay?" he called out, keeping his voice low to avoid waking Lily. The woman's eyes flicked to him, wide and panicked, but she nodded quickly, too quickly. "Fine," she said, her voice strained. "Just a broken bar tired." Ethan didn't buy it. He'd seen that look before on his ex-wife during labor, on accident victims during his EMT days. Pain, fear. He shifted Lily gently, letting her head rest against the backpack, and stood, crossing the car in a few strides. The woman flinched as he approached, her hand moving protectively over her stomach, and that's when he noticed the slight bulge beneath her coat. Not obvious, but enough to confirm his suspicion. "You're pregnant," he said, not a question. She hesitated, then nodded, her breath hitching. "Yeah." 7 months. 7 months? Ethan's brow furrowed. "You're not fine, you're in pain." "How bad is it?" "It's nothing," she insisted, but her face contorted as another wave hit, her knees buckling again. Ethan caught her arm, steadying her. "Sit down," he said firmly, guiding her to a seat. She didn't resist this time, collapsing onto the bench with a shuddering breath. The other passengers glanced over, curious but keeping their distance. Ethan knelt in front of her, his voice calm but authoritative. "I'm Ethan. I used to be an EMT. Tell me what's going on." Her name was Sarah, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The pain had started an hour ago, sharp and relentless, not like the Braxton Hicks contractions she'd read about. "It's too early," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm not due for weeks. I was just trying to get home." "A broken bar." Ethan's mind raced. Premature labor. On the subway, no hospital in sight. He glanced at the map above the doors. 3 stops until they hit a major station where he could call for help. Maybe 10 minutes. Too long if she was progressing fast. "Okay, Sarah, listen to me," he said, keeping his voice steady. "We're gonna figure this out. Can I check your pulse?" She nodded, and he pressed 2 fingers to her wrist, counting silently. "Fast, but not dangerously so, yet." "Have your waters broken?" She shook her head, but her breathing was shallow, her hands trembling as she gripped the edge of the seat. "I don't know a broken bar. I don't think so. It just hurts." Ethan's EMT training flooded back. Assess, stabilize, prioritize. He needed to time the contractions, keep her calm, and get her to a hospital. But as he opened his mouth to ask another question, Sarah let out a low moan, her body doubling over. The sound woke Lily, who stirred and blinked up at him, confused. "Daddy?" she mumbled, rubbing her eyes. "It's okay, sweetheart," Ethan said, glancing back at her. "Stay there, I'm helping someone." Lily's eyes widened as she noticed Sarah, but she stayed put, clutching her backpack like a shield. Ethan turned back to Sarah, who was gripping his arm now, her nails digging into his jacket. "It's coming," she gasped, I can feel it. Ethan's stomach dropped. Okay, hold on, just breathe with me. In and out. He guided her through slow breaths, but her eyes were wild, her body trembling. He glanced around. The Karahuti guy was filming on his phone now, the older woman muttering prayers under her breath. No help there. He checked the map again. 2 stops. 7 minutes, maybe. Not enough time. Sarah, I need you to tell me if you feel pressure, like you need to push, he said, his voice low but urgent. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I think a broken bar. I think I do. Shit. Ethan's mind screamed, but he kept his face calm. All right, we're gonna do this together. I've delivered a baby before. A lie. Technically he'd only assisted once, years ago, but close enough. He grabbed his jacket from the seat, folding it into a makeshift pillow. Lie back if you can. Sarah obeyed, her movements jerky, her breaths coming in short gasps. Ethan glanced at Lily, who was watching wide-eyed. Lily, honey, I need you to be brave and stay right there, okay? Close your eyes if you want. Lily nodded, her small hands twisting the straps of her backpack. Ethan turned back to Sarah, who was clutching his hand now, her grip like iron. I'm scared, she whispered. I know, Ethan said, but I'm here. You're not alone. The next few minutes were a blur. Sarah's contractions came faster, harder, each one ringing a cry from her that echoed in the car. Ethan coached her through it, his voice a steady anchor, even as his heart pounded. He checked her progress as discreetly as he could, praying the baby would hold off until they reached a station. But when Sarah's moans turned to a desperate, guttural sound, he knew they were out of time. Sarah, listen to me, he said, kneeling between her legs, the train's sway making it hard to stay steady. On the next one, you're gonna push hard as you can. She nodded, tears mixing with sweat on her face. The older woman had shuffled closer, murmuring encouragements, while Hoodie Guy kept filming, his phone a silent accusation of Ethan's focus. Ethan ignored him, his world narrowing to Sarah and the baby. The contraction hit, and Sarah pushed, her scream filling the car. Ethan guided her, his hand steadied despite the adrenaline flooding his system. Good, good, keep going, he said. Another push, then another, and then a tiny, slippery body slid into his hands, slick and impossibly small. A preterm baby, but moving, its tiny chest rising with a weak cry. Ethan's breath caught. He wrapped the baby girl in his flannel shirt, tying off the umbilical cord with a shoelace from his boot. Sarah was sobbing, reaching for her daughter, and Ethan carefully placed the baby in her arms, checking her breathing, her color. She was small, too small, but alive. You did it, he said, his voice thick. She's here. Sarah clutched the baby, her face a mix of exhaustion and awe. The train screeched to a stop, doors hissing open, and Ethan shouted for help. Paramedics were already on the platform as someone must have called ahead. They swarmed the car, taking over with practiced efficiency, whisking Sarah and the baby onto a stretcher. Ethan stepped back, his hands shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. Lily ran to him, burying her face in his side. Is she okay, Daddy? She whispered. Yeah, kiddo, he said, hugging her tight. She's gonna be okay. As the paramedics loaded Sarah onto the ambulance, she looked back at Ethan, her eyes locking on his. Thank you, she said, her voice barely audible. But there was something in her gaze, something that sent a shiver down his spine, like a memory he couldn't place. The crowd dispersed, the train moved on, and Ethan sat back down with Lily, his mind reeling. He just delivered a baby on a subway, a story for the ages. But as he replayed Sarah's face in his mind, the shiver returned. He'd seen her before, not in person, but somewhere. Those eyes, that voice. It nagged at him, a puzzle piece that didn't fit. Hours later, at home, after tucking Lily into bed, Ethan sat at his kitchen table, a beer in hand, staring at his phone. The story was already online. A Hoodie Guy's video had gone viral, grainy footage of Ethan kneeling on the subway floor, Sarah's cries in the background. Local hero, the headlines called him. He scrolled through the comments, half reading, until a notification popped up, a message from a name he didn't recognize. It was a link to an old news article, sent by an anonymous account. Ethan clicked it, his heart thudding. The headline hit him like a punch. Missing heiress, where is Emily Carter? Below it, A photo of a young woman, dark hair, those same piercing eyes. Sarah, or a broken bar Emily? His beer slipped from his hand, shattering on the floor. Ethan stared at the broken glass, his pulse hammering in his ears. The article was from 7 years ago, detailing the disappearance of Emily Carter, the only daughter of a billionaire tech mogul. She'd vanished after a public falling out with her family, leaving behind a trust fund worth millions and a trail of speculation. The photo was unmistakably Sarah's face, younger but unmistakable, stared back at him. The woman he'd helped on the subway wasn't just a stranger, she was a ghost from a headline, someone the world had been searching for. He grabbed his laptop, digging deeper. News reports, blog posts, even conspiracy threads on X painted a picture. Emily had been a rebel, clashing with her father's empire, rumored to have run off with a lover or joined some off-grid commune. No trace of her had been found until now. Apparently, on a subway with a newborn in her arms. Ethan's mind spun. Why was she hiding? Why the alias? And why did her eyes, in that fleeting moment on the train, seem to recognize him too? He hadn't been anyone back then, just a rookie EMT, barely scraping by, but something about her felt personal, like a debt unpaid. The next morning, he called the hospital, using the paramedics' report to track her down. Sarah or Emilia was stable, the baby in NICU but fighting. Ethan visited, Lily in tow, unable to shake the need to know more. When he saw her in the hospital bed, her face softened, but her eyes held that same guarded edge. "You didn't have to come," she said, her voice weak but warm. "Wanted to make sure you were okay," Ethan said, sitting beside her. Lily hovered shyly, offering a drawing she'd made of a baby in a subway car. Sarah smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. They talked, haltingly at first. She stuck to her starry Sarah, no last name, just a woman trying to start over. But when Ethan mentioned the article, her face froze, and for a moment, he thought she'd bolt. Instead, she sighed, her shoulders slumping. "You're not gonna let us go, are you?" she said. "Not when I know who you are, Emily." She flinched at the name, then nodded. "I ran because I had to," she said quietly. "My father a broken bar. He wasn't what people thought. Controlling, dangerous. I couldn't stay." Ethan listened as she unraveled her story. A life of privilege laced with fear, a father who'd do anything to keep her in line, a pregnancy she'd hidden to protect her child. She'd been living under the radar, scraping by, until the subway changed everything. But there was more. Emily's eyes locked on his, and she whispered, "You don't remember me, do you?" Ethan frowned. "What? 10 years ago, a car accident. You were the EMT who pulled me out." His breath caught. The memory flooded back. A rainy night, a crumpled sedan, a girl trapped in the wreckage. He'd held her hand, kept her conscious until the ambulance arrived. He'd never known her name. "You saved me then," she said. "And now you saved my daughter." Ethan's throat tightened. Fate, coincidence, whatever it was, it had tied their lives together twice. He didn't know what to say, but Lily broke the silence, climbing onto the bed to hug Emily, who laughed through tears. As Ethan left the hospital, he realized Emily's secret wasn't his to tell. She'd vanished once she could again, but something told him she wouldn't, and not this time. Not with a daughter to fight for. And maybe, just maybe, he'd be there to help her find her way. The subway car rattled through the dark tunnels, its fluorescent lights buzzing like a trapped insect. Ethan Walsh sat in a corner seat, his 6-year-old daughter, Lily, nestled against him, her small body rising and falling with soft snores. The weight of her head on his shoulder grounded him, a tether in the storm of his life as a single dad. His calloused fingers rested on her backpack, tracing the frayed stitching as he mentally juggled the hours left before his next shift at the construction site. It was late out past Lily's bedtime, but his foreman had kept him late, and the babysitter had flaked again. The train's rhythmic clatter was a lullaby of sorts, but Ethan's eyes stayed sharp, scanning the near-empty car out of habit. A few passengers dotted the seats, a teenager in a hoodie lost in his phone, an older woman clutching a grocery bag, and a young woman standing by the doors, one hand gripping the pole, the other pressed to her stomach. She wore a navy coat, her dark hair spilling from a knit cap, her face pale under the harsh lights. Ethan barely registered her at first. his mind on getting Lily home and into bed. But a sharp gasp from the woman cut through the train's hum, pulling his attention like a hook. He looked up. Her knuckles were white on the pole, her body swaying slightly, as if fighting to stay upright. Ethan's old EMT instincts, dormant since he'd left the job after Lily's birth, flared to life. Something was wrong. He shifted Lily gently, letting her head rest on her backpack, and stood, crossing the car in a few strides. The woman flinched as he approached, her hand tightening over her stomach, and Ethan noticed the slight bulge beneath her coat. "Pregnant? You okay?" he asked, keeping his voice low. Her eyes flicked to him, wide and guarded. "Fine," she said, but her voice was tight, her breath hitching. "Just a broken bar." Tired. Ethan wasn't convinced. He'd seen that look before on his ex-wife during labor, on crash victims in his ambulance days. "Pain, fear." "You're pregnant," he said, not a question. She hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, 7 months." 7 months? Ethan's brow furrowed. "You're not fine, you're in pain." "How bad?" "It's nothing," she said, but her face twisted as another wave hit, her knees buckling. Ethan caught her arm, steadying her. "Sit," he said firmly, guiding her to a seat. She sank onto the bench, her breath shallow. The other passengers glanced over. A hoodie teen was filming now, the older woman muttering under her breath, but no one moved to help. Ethan knelt in front of her, his voice calm but urgent. "I'm Ethan. Used to be an EMT. Tell me what's going on." Her name was Sarah, she said, her voice barely audible. The pain had started an hour ago, sharp and relentless, not like the practice contractions she'd read about. "It's too early," she whispered, her eyes glistening. "I'm not due for weeks. I was just trying to get home." "A broken bar." Ethan glanced at the subway map. 3 stops to a major station where he could call for help. 10 minutes, maybe. Too long if she was in labor. "Sarah, we're gonna figure this out. Can I check your pulse?" She nodded, and he pressed 2 fingers to her wrist, counting. "Fast, but not critical yet." "Have your waters broken?" She shook her head, but her hands trembled, gripping the seat. "I don't think so. It just hurts." Another groan escaped her, low and primal, and Ethan's stomach tightened. "Premature labor." On the subway. "No equipment, no backup," he coached her through slow breaths, trying to keep her calm, but her eyes were wild, her body tensing with each contraction. Lily stirred, blinking up at him. "Daddy?" she mumbled, rubbing her eyes. "It's okay, sweetheart," Ethan said, glancing back. "Stay there, I'm helping someone." Lily nodded, clutching her backpack, her eyes wide as she watched Sarah. Ethan turned back, his focus narrowing. "Sarah, if you feel pressure, like you need to push, tell me." She nodded, tears streaking her face. "I think a broken bar. I think I do." Ethan's heart sank. "No time to get to a station." "All right, we're gonna do this together. I've delivered a baby before." A half-brother he'd assisted once, years ago, but it was all he had. He grabbed his jacket, folding it into a pillow. "Lie back if you can." Sarah obeyed, her movements shaky. The older woman shuffled closer, murmuring prayers, while hoodie teen kept filming, his phone an intrusive eye. Ethan ignored them, his world shrinking to Sarah and the baby. Her contractions came faster, her cries echoing in the car. He checked her progress as discreetly as possible, his hand steadied despite the adrenaline. When her moans turned desperate, he knew the baby wasn't waiting. "Sarah, on the next one, push hard as you can," he said, kneeling between her legs, the train's sway forcing him to brace himself. She nodded, sobbing, and pushed. Ethan guided her, his voice a lifeline, until a tiny, slippery body slid into his hands. A preterm girl, small but alive, her weak cry piercing the air. He wrapped her in his flannel shirt, tying the cord with a shoelace. Sarah reached for her, and Ethan placed the baby in her arms, checking her breathing, her color. "Alive, for now." "You did it," he said, his voice thick. "She's here." The train screeched to a stop, doors hissing open. Paramedics swarmed the platform as someone had called ahead. They took over, whisking Sarah and the baby to an ambulance. As they loaded her, Sarah's eyes locked on Ethan's, a look that sent a shiver through him, like a memory he couldn't grasp. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan nodded, stepping back as Lily clung to his side. "Is she okay, Daddy?" she asked. "Yeah, "Kiddo," he said, hugging her. "She's gonna be okay." But that look haunted him. Hours later, at home, after tucking Lily in, Ethan scrolled through his phone. The story was viral, a hoodie teen's video, grainy but clear, showing Ethan delivering the baby. "Local hero," the headlines read. Then a message popped up, anonymous, with a link to an old article, "Missing heiress, where is Emily Carter?" The photo stopped his heart. Sarah's face, younger, but those same eyes. His beer slipped, shattering on the floor. Ethan's apartment was quiet, save for the hum of the fridge and the distant wail of a siren outside. He stood in the kitchen, staring at the broken glass at his feet. The article's headline burned into his mind, "Missing heiress, where is Emily Carter?" The photo of Emilia Saraha stared back from his phone, her dark eyes unmistakable. 7 years ago, she'd vanished, the only child of tech billionaire Richard Carter, leaving behind a fortune and a media frenzy. Rumors swirled, she'd fled with a lover, joined a cult, or worse, been silenced by her powerful family. No trace, no Ledsa until now, clutching a newborn on a subway. Ethan's hand shook as he swept up the glass, his mind racing. Why was she hiding?